hope that you can hear us well, see us well. Just let us know. We're gonna wait one more minute for other participants to join, and then we will start. All right. So I hope you're all ready. Thanks for joining to today's webinar, in which we're going to talk about stimulating organic growth and doing that by identifying streams of revenues in your digital business so that you will not leave money on the table, so to say. And this is the goal for the discussion of today. As very briefly, we're going to go through the realities of a mature company, how to generate new ideas, validate them. We're going to talk with you about some of our own methodology on how do we do it, and some of the takeaways. And last but not least, towards the end, we're going to have a Q&A panel in which we would gladly trying to answer to all of your questions. So just post them into the Q&A chat, and we will be gladly doing it. Also keep in mind that we will be recording this webinar, and then potentially we're going to share it with you towards the end so that you potentially can watch it later on as you will want. Now, just very briefly about us. So I'm Bogdan, together with my colleague John. We're dealing on a day-to-day basis with software product companies and with technological products, and at Yonder, doing for now over 30 years, having experience in multiple verticals with multiple products and running like 50 collaborations probably in parallel. And since 2013, being part of a broader group of companies called Constellation Software International, we had the chance and the opportunity to see the intimate parts, let's say, of multiple software product companies, starting up with the financials and ending up with the way they do processes and the way they approach this kind of challenges. Now, before moving on, and as a start grounding rule, I think it's important to try to understand the maturity life cycle of a software business and also where you are. And working with mature product companies, what we're seeing is that along the years, most probably they started into what we call like a product development phase, in which it required an investment, in which there were high risks, and then they would be needing to pretty much demonstrate that they can add value. Then usually the second part into the life cycle of a product is the induction phase, moment in which you feel you're ready, taking the product, putting it into the market, and start having sales. And usually if that ends up really well, you're finding yourself towards a growth phase in which pretty much sales are going up, you've passed some sort of a break-even point, you're starting to do profit, and also you start to be a cash flow positive company. And if you also pass that phase, usually there is this maturity point in which, think about it, this is the peak of your experience as a business in terms of, sales, profit, and also this is the moment in which you're having the lowest risks of all of them. And usually, naturally, this is continued by a declination phase in which your sales are going to be decreasing, cash flow as well, and profits, and also the risk of your business is going to be on an increased trend. And this can be due to multiple reasons. The way you approach customer needs, maybe some of the technical debt, some of the risks, and so on and so forth. But if it is to do one step back, we see that there is this critical point in the life cycle of a software product company, which is at its peakest. And usually companies do want to enlarge this and to continue it as much as possible, so that the life cycle of your company can be extended as well. And this is what we call a life cycle extension of a software product company. So basically, your sales trend are still maintaining or growing, also the profits, also the business risks are still remaining low. So yeah, this is quite a good moment to be in. Now, there is this question of how to do it. So since this is very related to growth, you have multiple ways of doing it. So we see a good potential in extending this life cycle and the growth of your company through acquisitions. Actually, the group of companies that we're part in does that quite well. So growth through M&A processes. On the other hand, there are other types of growth, which some of or most part of it can be related to what we're calling organic growth, or growing with your current product or new products in the existing customer base, and trying to identify streams in order not to leave potential money on the table. And that's a point which we will be trying to tackle today. Now, usually in this maturity phase of your company, there are multiple potential things that can happen. So you can be in like a milking phase, in which pretty much there is a strong focus on profits, and we do see quite a good correlation between, as the profit goes along the time, the organic growth usually is being affected, and we do see that in also the companies that we're working with. Or we do see other companies in which also the profits are low and the organic growth are low if you don't know how to manage it properly. And I think the ideal scenario in which you would want to be is a place in which you're still maintaining your profits, but also stimulating your organic growth. And the question is how to do it. Now, when talking about organic growth, there are multiple ways of doing it. So if you look at what McKinsey is saying about strategies of doing organic growth, this can go in multiple areas. So it's either investing in existing products or services, or commercial activities that generated past organic growth, or creating brand new products or services and business models and so on and so forth from scratch, and try to validate those as fast as possible, or performing better, maybe financially, maybe taking care more of the profit on the core commercial capabilities, or maybe combining all those along. And what we're seeing quite a lot is that those kind of initiatives, in our jargon, we call them new initiatives, are ways to extend organic growth, which do come up with certain processes. So usually a new initiative, it's a way of determining whether or not a new product or an existing improved product can be ran into like sustainable format along the years, and that can support organic growth for your company. And now, depending on experience, this can have multiple flavors. For example, in our group, we do have practices on how to run new initiatives in terms of standards, how to limit the investment. And this was also made just because sometimes the validation takes too long. And well, also itself, so to stimulate organic growth and identifying lost revenue streams through new initiatives has its own complexity. So the question is, yeah, how do you do that? As a process, most probably you will want to start with an idea, then move on towards a building phase, then trying to launch it, and then trying to validate those kind of ideas and what it was built, and do that as fast as possible. On the other hand, what we're seeing in practice is that this is starting with an idea. It's a never-ending story that you're not having enough built features or new features or existing improvements so that you can launch it and then you can validate it with the customer. And what we're seeing most oftenly is that this generates quite an expensive learning. And in some groups, like it's ours, it's pretty hard to comply with those standards. So running an initiative, it's an expensive learning way of obtaining feedback that can be used for identifying potential revenue streams and generate organic growth. Now, if you look at a new initiative as like a new life cycle, it's pretty much the secret. It's in making sure the initial investment barrier is as low as possible and as shrinked as possible so that you can run multiple iterations and then to actually map on the specificities that your customers do need. On the other hand, in the life of an executive or a decision maker in a product companies, there are other challenges, like where do you squeeze in? Where do you find time? And by the way, this is a real life print screen of one of the executives that I'm working with, of his agenda. And it's pretty much packed. And that's happening for quite a lot of us. On the other hand, it's also about how do you generate ideas in a sustained manner? So like having a process of generating ideas, and how would you do that? And then another question that you need to ask yourself is, okay, but we have maybe some ideas, but how much is going to take? What's going to be the cost of the investment initially to have that learning? And with our experience, we believe that there is a shortcut. It's not about reinventing the wheel. It's also about learning from companies that are doing this as a living. You can think about companies like Google Ventures or Techstars, that what they do is they try to iterate as fast as possible through ideas and obtain learning iterations in a very fast-paced manner. We call those micro-initiatives, or something which is way shorter, validation-centric, and so on. And if it is to look at the anatomy of it, what you would want is to, again, starting with the idea, having some build on it, launching it, validating and learning it, and doing it in a very fast pace. You might either want to skip the build phase and just somehow find a way from ideation to launch something and validate and learn. And you would also want to have it very time boxed so that you will know the investment upfront, how much it's going to take, also the timeline of it. You might also want to have it like place boxed so that you can make sure you're putting people into the same room, that there is collaboration, that there is cooperation on it. you might also want to have something which is brainstormable. So basically, besides that, also stimulate the creation of ideas into a sustained manner. And last but not least, you might want to have this very validation centric. So the purpose of it is to validate and learn in a fast manner, so that later on you can do things based on the learnings. Yeah, there is this question of, okay, when should I do it? So it's when you want to have new initiatives or try to validate ideas, or when you want to improve your current product or an add-on initiative, or when you want to have like buy-in for the initiative, or you might want to, I don't know, create like a business case and things like that. And this can be applied on new features on current product, improving new features, new product themselves, micro products, add-on products that do connect with your ecosystem and products, and so on and so forth. Now, in order to develop a methodology, like I was mentioning, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we based our way of treating this kind of micro initiatives based on well-known ways of doing it. So we get the good parts of the design sprints, the methodology patented at Google Ventures, through which they try to validate ideas and do that initial phase for startups. Also things like the business model canvas, in which you're trying to offer a very neat and proper context for everybody. And also things like best practices that we've learned through the year and best practices from our group, and also incorporate learnings and pieces from the design thinking. So how we usually approach this kind of challenges is by trying to do some sort of a workshop. It's a 1 to 2 weeks thing in which we're trying to bring all those qualities that we've mentioned to the same table to create this kind of a workshop. And it's usually split in 3 parts. So the first part, it's on prepping it. So in order to validate and ideate, you might want to have a proper similar context for everybody that is going to prepare to it. And you might want to tackle things like, what are going to be the customers that you're going to validate against? Maybe talk to them already, prepare them up front, and prepare your validation. Then it's going to be about creating like a business model canvas in which you're giving over lateral thinking of the way your business works to all the participants. Then maybe you would be thinking about trying to define the personas of your customers that are the potential users of this product. And last but not least, trying to see, who's the competition and trying to analyze your competition. Then after you have a really good, neat and gritty context for everybody that is participating, try to run like a hands-on sprint week. Usually in new methodologies, this is like a 4 days thing in which on the first day, you're bringing in the experts, trying to define some of your potential problems and come up with solutions. And then based on those multiple types of problems, select one good candidate through which you're going to develop it further, try to see what the competition is doing, then based on it to do interactive prototypes, which eventually you'll want, or in the 4th day of the hands-on sprint, to actually test and learn with real customers. And last but not least, based on the learnings, to come up with some pricing models, having like a roadmap exercise, and the conclusions and next steps. And what we do see quite often in our experiences is maybe to rerun parts of the workshop all along, maybe to further develop that specific idea. And I think the big thing, it's about creating a context, finding proper problems to fix, coming up with solutions, prototyping so that you can put them into the real world, and then put it in the hands of the customer so that you can have the learning, and based on it, try to develop it further. Now, since we're thinking about it as some sort of a workshop type, usually we recommend having 4 to 7 people as participants. The most important of them being an executive sponsor that can pretty much elevate this kind of a solution towards the organizational level so that you can have support for it. But also persons like a designer that is able from solution sketches to come up with interactive prototypes, and the product manager that can understand the dynamics of a software product company and how to translate from rough ideas towards product processes, and so on and so forth. What we've also seen that it brings quite a lot of value is to have other representatives from other departments, things like the tech or sales or customer support. And we've seen that it offers quite a broader perspective on how would you look at specific problems and specific solutions and how those things make sense into their world. And last but not least, we've also experienced and have positive feedback if having a facilitator that can pretty much make sure the things are happening in a specific way, make sure certain activities are not overthrown or not taken into account, and so on and so forth. And to deep dive into the specificities of this, I'll leave my colleague John to enter more into details.
Thank you, Bogdan. So as it was mentioned before, the workshop preparation, it's all about grounding ourselves in the realities of where we are at, what's our business and how we're doing stuff. It's important to look into within and just make sure that we're all on the same level. So here's what we would recommend for you to do if you're trying to run it on your own or to join with us to do it, is have a look back at what our company is, what's the core mission that we're trying to have, who our users are and what we're trying to help them with, and of course, what's the value that we're bringing to them and to our customers. And what's the best course of doing this, and what we found out to be the best way to package all this is filling in a business model canvas. We always like to start, and we recommend you to start from the customers. They are our bread and butter. They are the ones that drive the business forward. So we usually start when we fill it in our workshops, and we recommend you to do it to start with them. Think about and who they are, what their segments are, and of course what their needs are, and that way we can see how our current products meet them. And of course, this is very important to start with. We can't have that without having a means to reach them, what our channels for reaching them are, and of course, how we build the relationships together. All of these are like the blueprint of the products, of course, followed up with what they're actually paying for. This envelops the blueprint of the product that we are now having. But we can't have just the product without the other sides of the business. So for that, we're usually having our key activities that we have to do in the business day in, day out. We also have our key resources that we're having, our key partners that we have to keep a relationship on, and we also have a cost structure. This helps us ground us in the reality of the way we are, and will let us have like a slingshot for the future. We started about the users, and it's only fair to keep diving deeper and to develop like a customer intimacy and get to know our users the better, as much as possible. So our next steps, what we recommend you to do is try to build personas, and what we found out works really well is look into as much in depth as possible of who the users that are using our product are. And of course, you can't leave the buyer persona out, because the managers of the world, since they are paying it. We recommend it, if you're doing this exercise, to focus on what our users try to achieve, what their frustrations are, and most important, what their jobs to tackle at their workplace is. There's a lot of hidden opportunities that it can be found there. But just our users don't make the whole business layout true. There's also our grippy competitors that we're fighting against. If we want to know where we are, we should also focus on our competitors. We found out that a very brief competitive analysis can work wonders into just establishing our position and help us know where we are. We usually recommend you to just focus on four major aspects of the business. What are the core features that we're trying to have? What are our strategies and our competition strategies and focus? You will know that because you've been with them, or you'll be with their competition at trade shows. You'll probably stalk them on LinkedIn to watch the release notes, their YouTubes and so on. You can figure out what their focus and strategies are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and afterwards you can build like a matrix of our competitors, and that will help us have full blueprint and full map of where we are at in our competitive landscape. Moving on, we can start into diving deeply into where we want to go. And how we usually recommend, and it's best practice to Bogdan's point, we usually have divided, for the most part, our 4-day workshop into half of days. In the first day, it's all about framing the problem and sketching solutions. In the second day, it's all about deciding where to put our focus and prepare a storyboard for our solution. Day 3, it's all about prototyping and preparing for user testing. And in 4th day is just testing, learning, and most important, measuring how we are doing it and how bad that comes. For the first 2 days, it's all about the experts and designers attending. For day 3, designers take the main event or the main the cap, and they are in the lead. And for the fourth part, for the 4th day, is just us with the customers. So even deeper into details, how we're recommended to do it, or how we're doing it, and we recommend you to do it if you try it. First day, what we usually do is in the first half of the day, we focus on problem framing. We have all these wonderful people gathered from all around our business, from customer support, executives, and so on. So why not try to get a map of our business just from multiple perspectives with some expert interviews, and think afterwards what our long-term goal for the company is and what we want to achieve within the week. Once we have that, we can have a map where you can map the situation, and then we can start having imaginative exercises and start into fast researching with lightning demos, and then spend the rest of the day sketching and go as crazy as possible with as many solutions as we can think of. And on the sky is the limit in terms of what we can think of. Of course, they have to match on what we're mapping of what we started with. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. And that should wrap up day 1. For day 2, what we're recommending is to start with would be to have like a heat map vote, where we just vote on the solutions, not necessarily tied together of any just knowing who they are or who created which solution. We recommend them to start presenting. We can do that with pins or with everything that works in our online, like thumbs up votes, everything works for that. Have them a solution presentation so we can get to know the better what the flow of thinking was or what worked. Have another round of votes. The democratic process never fails, hopefully. And moving on towards the end of the half of the day, we have a decider vote, and then we will know that solution was executively voted. So then we can start into using our knowledge before, start putting a user flow with the persona on our solution, develop it even more, and then preparing us from a product perspective, prepare a storyboard for it, for the product, which we can later use for the go-to-market plan and so on. And that should wrap up the day 2. Moving on into the day 3, what we recommend to do and what we're usually doing is split the team into 2. First part, we start working with the designers, starting developing from napkin drawings and the sketches that we have so far and photos and something that we built, start developing from that, or towards presentable enough, higher fidelity mockups that we can then use and to test with our customers. And the other part of the team will just focus on preparing an interview guide, how we want the interview to flow, where we want to put our focuses, what we want to measure from the interview, and of course, how we want to set up. Do we want to drive to our customers because they just live down the street? Do you want to set up Zoom calls similar with this one? How do we want to measure, or how are we going to measure the output? Just building Microsoft Forms or Google Forms, or if we have other solutions, just wrapping up, preparing a guide so that in the end, when we meet the users the next day, we're ready. And of course, since we talked about them, we should just make sure that we contact them and we get them ready for our 4th day. And what we usually do here, we just sit alongside them while presenting the solution. And we try to get them to use it, and we try to collect feedback and see how they feel about our solution that we've worked together for a week now, or close to a week now, how they feel about it. And after we collect it, we have to analyze it and package it up into learnings. This is very important because our initial design might not survive the mix with reality. We developed a solution the past 4 days, or 3 days, we fell in love with it, but as usually what happens is it can have a clash with reality that just breaks it. So we just want to make sure that at this point, once we get the learning, we know how to move on, whether we want to pivot or not, or then we can just dive into having like a pricing model workshop, because we know it was validated with the users. Now we can see how we want to sell it. And what we can have here is just have like a pricing workshop where we just explore various ways of pricing the workshop, from value-based pricing all the way up to subscription, or packaging up into like a concierge service where they pay for it, where they pay as by usage, or where sky is the limit. After we have that, we can dive even deeper. We can start building it or expanding it or building the roadmap for it. Again, small and nimble is the keyword. Building a very brief MVP. It's usually what we recommend and recommend you to try. Just have the minimum viable product where the flow meets the user needs, then following up with the minimum marketable product, and at the very end, think about where to productize it even more. And just wrap it up with another business model canvas, this time just for the idea or the solution, to make sure that it fits the business need and it fits the business inside as a context. This would be our recommended approach.
Yeah, and this is how we usually do it from start to end. So to find potential lost revenue streams through micro initiatives in which we're putting people into the same room with a single focus on finding solutions and validate based on a very specific and same context, and doing, preparing solutions which we validate them with customers and then try to wrap it up and know how to price it and how to move forward. But I think besides this process, and by the way, we haven't invented anything, let's say, brand new. So it's about combining knowledge from different places, putting all together and start experimenting. And besides that, we also want to share with you some important takeaways that makes it a success. So we've seen that it brings quite a lot of value to prepare quite a lot up front. So think about that this week or 2 weeks. Based on it, it will depend your organic growth. So the thing is, you want to organize it really well. You want to have activities sorted. You want to invest the proper time to create a context for everybody. putting the proper people in the room and yeah, doing it. So then it's also about, locking up people into a room. So we've seen that it's sometimes even more important than following a specific process to put people in the same room with a validation mindset, and that's even more important than following a process. And yeah, we are asked all the time about our customers. Okay, but you're putting into the same room the highest paid people in the company. So is that worth it? Is it not? So I think if you broader look at it, compared to a cost of just building things and only later on learning, it's a very, very cheap learning experience that you should do. Then it's also about generating ideas and involving multiple departments. So we've seen that, some of the most important ideas are coming just because people with different mindsets were on the same table, and it made quite a lot of sense and generated quite a lot of rooms for improvement. Then it's also about inspiring. So yeah, it's finding how others are doing it, maybe find it your own way, mapping your own way. It doesn't mean you have to reinvent the wheel all the time, but this type of unicity can come also through inspiration. Then it's also making sure everybody understands what you're doing and has a similar context. So when working on those micro initiatives, start with putting yourselves very deep into the ground of understanding the current realities of your business and your products before just generating ideas. And it's also about involving customers. So the whole purpose of such a focused, such a good, such a solution-centric team is to obtain validation. So involving customers and preparing them for giving you feedback, it's a must. Also, what we're seeing, it makes quite a lot of sense, is to have a designer involved. Somebody that can translate from business processes or from solution diagrams into real-time interactive mockups. And on the other hand, to the same importance, is having an executive sponsor, which is somebody that can lift up your idea into the business so that it will not die into the unknowns or the ununderstood parts of your company. And that's as important as the other one. And last but not least, we've seen quite a lot of advantages on using interactive tools. You can think about things like mockups.com or Miro, or I don't know, Lucid Spark, or we've experimented with multiple tools, Microsoft Whiteboard. So it's quite it offers quite a good perspective, and it puts all the information into the same spot rather than drawing it on a whiteboard, putting things on paper and so on, even though that has its own unicity as well, but it's easier to forget, easier to slip somewhere else, and so on and so forth. So all in all, I think this is it. We hope we've covered most of your expectations, and we're looking forward to respond to your questions. So we have one question here. So can you give us an example of micro initiative, and maybe it's helpful to describe the approach you would take for such an initiative? So maybe a thing that emerged, I can give you an example. It was happening into the laboratory inventory management survey. So we're having this company that we're working with, which they had like software being used in labs, and they had this big need of generating organic growth. So through such a workshop, we realized, based on their business processes, based on what competition is doing, and based on what the others doing, is that in their entire process, there is also this manual part in which, like, lab workers are taking samples from a place to another, storing them, which was pretty similar to what was happening into the warehousing industry. So we came up with this mobile solution. In this case, it worked as a new product, but an add-on product to their current software suite, to be used for managing and storing samples in this laboratory process. And it's, based on this workshop week, we came out and had some mock-ups. We had them validated with real customers, and we also had some sort of a pricing solution on how much money to request on it, how to sell it, how to integrate it with the current things. And that done in like a 1 week and some span with a minimum investment. I hope I've answered to your question. So another question, what tool do you use for the visuals of this presentation? They're delicious. Yeah, thanks for the feedback.
Yeah.
And it's just neat and gritty PowerPoint. But we have involved usually a designer in helping us, enriching the capabilities and the things that we're doing.
But it's mainly PowerPoint and the skills of our UX designers.
Yeah. Another question. Okay, so how can I rank ideas generate in the early phases of the process? Which one I should deep dive? So yeah, that's very specific to the process. In the first parts of the process, it's about searching for problems or potential problems, and then coming up with solutions. So what we're doing is, this is the beauty of involving other departments, so that everybody can has its vote. It can be a democratic approach. Usually, this is supported by an executive sponsor, which maybe has an even broader perspective on doing it. But I think if it is to map it outside or in their heads, I think all of us have like a quality scenario or like a ranked metrics of taking the idea and the solution and rank it. It can be based on things like potential revenues, like the investment size. You can use things like t-shirt sizes just to know how big a thing like that can be. It can be things like, I don't know, the impact that such a solution would make into the world of your customers. And also it's about, it's a lot of, business context that you have. Also things like how much is going to solve a real problem. Is this an existing problem, or you're going to reinvent basically a new segment or a new problem for your customers that they all don't know about it. So this kind of quality attributes I would put if it is to judge it based on a decision metrics. But sometimes it's way better that they come more empirically and more democratically, so to say. But you can have that pragmatic approach as well.
And it's good to have it stored. Maybe you want to revisit some of your decision later, because you might end up having like roadmap ideas that might come circle back 5 years from now or something else that are still, if they are still valid.
Yeah. Any other questions? I hope we've answered it, by the way. Maybe waiting for another one for a few more seconds. If not, yeah, there is another one. No questions. Good example of business model and sprint.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the overview. Well, thank you all. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for some of you waking up really early to make it. Some of you staying up really late because we're having participants from US all the way to Australia. We will be here and gladly responding to all of your questions also later on, and we would be glad to share answers with you. Just reach us through an email or through the contact form from our website. And also, if you want at some point to review this presentation, you'll have access to the recording. Thank you all, and we will keep in touch. Take care.
Bye bye.